TV show The Nanny. After having a dinner party at her own house, Fran Drescher was beaten at gunpoint. I literally felt like I was screaming in pure terror. She's still audible to me. Except for me, everyone had been gagged. They also placed a pistol to my head. You no longer have the life you had anticipated. Fran believed that the events of that night would remain a secret forever. I get comments like, "Oh, I wish I had your life." From others. I was saying, be careful what you wish for. The media then revealed everything though. Fran experienced sexual assault. How long until someone utilized that stunning body again? Just hearing you say that makes me nauseous. I was linked to the rapist by one of these tabloids that resurrected the case. She just said, "I'm in trouble." For example, what do you mean you're in trouble? A sex offender's route map for starting to pursue me was drawn by a photographer. Why was she left unprotected by others? He was going crazy. Consider the number of lives you have spared. Along with our girlfriend who was organizing her wedding, we had arranged to return to my place. That was the kind of stuff we were going to discuss over dinner. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion and two armed men dashed in. And I let out a true primal cry. It seemed as though every single cell in my body let out a single, horrifying scream. After leading us upstairs to the bedroom, they bound me and placed a pistol to my head, and I realized, this is it. Except for me, everyone had been gagged. I therefore spoke with him the entire time. I was able to commit the traits of the man who was the actual rapist to memory. I wasn't sure if we would survive this or not. I couldn't help but worry who would be the first to go and who would have to watch as their loved ones perished before they themselves perished. Franny called us, screaming that two guys had broken in, raped her, threatened Judy with a pistol, and forced Peter to watch. You know, I don't. I wish I could have done more, but perhaps we wouldn't have survived if I had done more. We can both vaguely recall the first time we saw each other when we were 15. He was going down the stairs while I was going up. I said, "Hello." She then uttered hello. And I was in shock that such a voice could emanate from such a lovely face. We appeared to have known one another for our whole lives. He and I had become somewhat of a relationship by the time we graduated from high school. And we were married by the time we were 21. Is it a good thing that you are now married to the person you met? Indeed, we have collaborated on almost everything. We had started creating scripts for ourselves to star in something like I Love Lucy back when we were just 21 years old. They served as our idols. When we were performing The Nanny, Lucy Jr. wrote us a letter that read, "Be careful what you wish for." We made The Nanny. It was our baby. The headline in the New York Times read, "Mary Poppins, she's not." Franny possessed a force of nature-like quality. From the start. While brainstorming names for the kids, we agreed that Brighton and Grace would be our choice if we ever had kids of our own. It was Fran and I on the back steps, holding hands and saying, "Okay, we're gonna go out there and everything's gonna be great." When we began defeating Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I realized the program was a fairly good hit. Oh, I'm so grateful. We were aware that we had struck gold. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Fran Drescher. Fran Drescher. Fran Drescher. This is exciting. Yes, early this morning I was speaking with Robin. I stated the nanny Fran Drescher is coming in. I read in People magazine that she was the victim of a violent crime, I told her. Fran experienced sexual assault. How long until someone utilized that stunning body again? Most likely, you wouldn't even use it for years. Oh no! One of those TV tabloid shows ran while the show was successful. It was reopened by these tabloids who also introduced me to rapist. They spoke with him when they got to the prison, and it was really awful. Even though this tragedy happened 10 years ago, watching it on TV gave me severe post-traumatic stress disorder. And for me, who didn't really let myself experience it at all. And that's when I kind of began all over with it again. I want to know if the offender is present in this room. No, he has served 114 years in prison. Oh, are you serious? He must have had a large following. Indeed. Even if there were 2 buses full of witnesses, oh boy. Was that a group? Sibling. How are these individuals apprehended by the police? I have a photographic recall, I must admit, and I was watching TV that very week. If you're in a situation, it's really important that you get the details, the features, they said. This is crucial, but most victims are too afraid to make an effort to be cognizant of it. And I thought back to that interview, the exact evening we were taken prisoner at gunpoint. As a result, I was able to commit the man's characteristics to memory who was actually the rapist. I ultimately assisted the police with the artist's sketch, and they were able to capture him using it as a basis. As a result, his fly was unzipped, and he had a pocket full of valuables when they pulled him over just before he entered the freeway. Even though Fran Drescher's assailant is now in jail, her battle is far from done. At that moment, I felt like a victim again, since a group of photographers had set up shop in front of my home and had taken pictures of me that accurately reflected the street I lived on. And as a result, created a road plan for a sex offender with 2 convictions to begin pursuing me. I just picked myself up, cleaned myself up, and forced my emotions aside. Naturally, though, I now understand that they only travel deep within. When a tray was dropped by a waiter or busboy in a restaurant, I seem to recall that it made a loud, smashing sound that was heard by all patrons. But because the anguish was so near the surface, I sprang to my feet and cried out. Since my spouse appeared to be more visibly impacted by it, he entered treatment. I could see he was having trouble with it. Him! He was silent, as in he was not talking at all. I was still in my superhero phase. I thus thought I could manage this, but we ought to get him some support. Our continual fighting grew pretty terrible. However, I started to be quite controlling with her. I was more concerned with what she would wear, eat, weigh, and who she would be with than with anything personal about me. I wanted complete control over her and that show. He didn't want it, so I left, and it was really difficult. And while he wasn't talking to me, we still had the nanny to complete for at least another year. For the latter 2 years of the series, we were apart. And he relocated to New York after the series concluded, and we actually filed. He was furious and couldn't get far enough away from me. I had never really done something like that for myself at the expense of someone else, so I felt bad about leaving him. I was completely consumed by the delight of others. If you don't release the pain, it will eventually find its way into your body. My issue at the time was that I didn't truly go into the depths of my desperation. I wasn't feeling well, and it was like a perfect storm. The couple's marriage fell apart, and I was just so miserable. For the whole first year following the conclusion of the nanny, as well as the entire final season, I had been dealing with symptoms that I couldn't exactly put my finger on. I essentially went from doctor to doctor, and each one of them offered me a different course of action. Up until my eventual diagnosis, after 2 years, there are 8 physicians. I'm very surprised, but you have adenocarcinoma, she remarked over the phone. What's that? I asked. She then said, uterine cancer. I simply went to my knees and started crying. My remedy was going to be a completely hysterectomy. Indeed, a radical hysterectomy is an arduous procedure for any woman, but for someone like myself who has never given birth, it's an especially cruel pill to take, and I had a really difficult time with the hurt from that. I believed that receiving a cancer cure was really receiving yet another punishment. I was also upset with the medical community. My body had deceived me, I felt. When I would get home from the hospital, I would gaze in the mirror at my bloated black and blue body and see the harsh red line over my pubic bone. And I can recall being so depressed one day. I entered the bedroom. My partner was reading a book and going about his business, and I recall beating my fists against his chest, feeling that I was no longer myself and that I didn't want things to be this way. I believed that I would never again be who I was. Nothing will ever be the same in my life. I'm not going to go there anymore, regardless of the goals I had or the direction I thought I was heading. In order to aid in my recovery, my parents also came to be with me. My mother was frantically going from room to room, opening and shutting cabinets and preparing lunch for the family. Without experiencing excruciating pain, I was unable to raise myself even a single step. That particular day, my mom had just finished preparing lunch when my cousin Susan arrived. As we gathered around the dining room table to eat, Susan began choking on her food while chatting to us. I had previously witnessed someone doing this at a restaurant. After I noticed it, she stood up right away, continuing to hold her glass of white wine, and she began to act as though she was having trouble breathing. With no time to spare, I leap off the table. I close the distance behind cousin Susan and begin the Heimlich maneuver. And my mother adds, "Don't rip your stitches," in a voice that sounds just like mine. Suddenly, a little piece of the poultry that she had regurgitated falls out of her mouth and onto the floor. Relative Susan, who is still having trouble breathing, exclaims, "Fran, you saved my life." Strangely enough, though, cousin Susan rescued me that day, since at that very moment, I felt like myself again. And I made the decision to take action. I'm going to use this to my advantage. I was thinking, I'm not going to handle this pain like I did the last one. I think that talking about something takes the curse off of it, so I really have to approach it from a new angle by using my feelings of fear, anguish, vulnerability, and asking for help, all of which I was unable to do after the break-in. I'm speaking now. In addition to having survived cancer, I was also the victim of violent crime, and I was quite open about it in order to show people that if she could overcome her ordeal, perhaps I could have the bravery to do the same. Everybody has hardships in life, but there are always bright spots. Knowing that I survived cancer means it's one of the factors that brought Peter and I back together. Fran had cancer, our boss informed him over the phone. His fury vanished completely, leaving just love in its place. And from what I gather, he came out as gay after you got divorced? Indeed. You know, even though I've always understood that I'm drawn to men, I was also drawn to her. Therefore, I believe that we both didn't know ourselves as well because we had met when we were 15 and had grown to be really codependent. We've learned so much about ourselves that we've become completely different persons. The good news is that we've figured out how to reimagine our friendship and affection for one another in a way that works much better for us right now. You have stated that transforming adversity into opportunity has been your life's work. Fran's life was changed by her personal experience, and she has since impacted many others. Fran had no stopping her. Consider the number of lives you have spared. Despite the PTSD shroud I've learned to live with, I'm a survivor who has managed to go on with my life. You have to make an effort to give your suffering meaning. I now truly consider this to be my life's work.